Hello everybody and welcome to another weekly update. My name is Martin. I'm an Inkscape developer, developing Inkscape on behalf of users. First of all, this week I want to give a big shout out and a big thank you to all of the new patrons that joined. Thanks to that GIMP shout out on Reddit that seems to have created a bit of interest in helping fund free and open source graphics projects. Thank you all very, very much for helping us here, and hopefully that you find these videos enjoyable, at the very least instructive about what I'm actually up to. And a big shout out to all of my existing patrons. Thanks for sticking with me. Okay, so what did I get up to this week? I think I want to start with a story from my childhood. When I was in school, I used to have this chemistry teacher, let's call him Professor Snape. And this chemistry teacher was very, I won't say witty, but very Snape-like. And one day he said to me, when I handed in some homework, he said to me, Martin, well, not quite like that, not quite like friendly like that, more like, Martin, I do hope you understand that the school gives you 45 minutes to complete each of the homework assignments, and it's clear that you are expected to spend 30 of those minutes thinking about the problem and then 15 minutes writing it down. Now, while I can see here that you've written everything down, I can tell very straight away that you haven't spent 5 seconds considering the problem at all. And that is why I'm giving you an F. And while the teacher himself isn't rated very highly in my regard, I always remember that lesson in thinking time, because I think it is important to think about problems sometimes. And this is a story that basically all rolls into, I spent this week thinking about things. So the first half of this week, I was attempting to finish off the connectors tool for the contract that I have, and the client still isn't happy with how the connectors tool works. So we're trying to dust off what the remaining functionality is, and we had to have video chats and like walk through some user experience problems and try and figure out what it is that's going wrong. And the kind of like automatic positioning of checkpoints that the client would like to see went against a lot of the assumptions that the live path effects kind of make. And so I had to spend some time pacing and thinking about how to implement the kind of functionality that they want to see without having to rewrite the whole connectors functionality again from scratch. And that took a number of days, actually. I honestly had to sit down, had to do other things, to do some other contracts and things, so that I could just think about the problem, because sometimes it's not obvious how these things should be solved. But by Thursday, I'd kind of got my head around like what needed to be done, and I implemented a basic automatic pattern so that nodes can be made dynamic, is what would have called it in the code. And a dynamic checkpoint inside of a connector is something that follows the endpoint, the connected object, so that it's not as static as it would be, and it can be optionally dynamic in either the y-axis or the x-axis or both. And it just means that when you drag around those endpoints, that the next point next to it, the first checkpoint that it will go through, will be somewhat dependent upon the position of that object. So as you drag it around, it makes sense. Now, the reason why this was so difficult is because there are 2 stages to the connectors point tool. There's the line, and then there's the connected objects. And if you're editing the line, you have all of the properties that you need to be able to edit immediately available to you. But if you're dragging around the objects, then you need to by this point the line's properties are already settled, right? And so all you're doing is you're trying to work out what the route should be based upon the new position of the endpoint. And this request to make it dynamic kind of breaks the assumption that this property of this guideline is settled by this point. And so I had to like rethink about like how would these checkpoints be dynamic? Like how could you have a dynamic line when the moving around the endpoint can't change that line? But I managed to encode the property in the line itself. The line isn't actually changed, only its interpretation is, which is how I've managed to get around the problem. And so I delivered the update to the client. The client was actually very happy with the functionality, with the basic functionality. But we had a separate problem, which is that the moving of the dynamism of the ends is not sufficient for the client. The client would also like to see midpoints be dynamic. And obviously I'd spent so much time thinking about making the ends dynamic, and you remember how I said that the ends are different from the lines themselves, that I hadn't really thought too much about like how the middle of the line would be dynamic. Fortunately, I've already started implementing the changes necessary to make the middles more dynamic. And that can be done because while you're editing the line itself, you have access to all the properties and you can actually redefine what the line is. And there's no messing about as much as you would when you're repositioning the ends. So that's on its way, but I haven't had much time to complete that section of work. So you'll probably see that next week, I think. I think I got up to some other stuff this week, but you know what? This video is long enough already. Thank you all very much for watching this a little bit haphazard video this week. Thank you for your support, and please do subscribe to my Patreon if you think that my Inkscape work is valuable to you. And hopefully I will see you all next week.